We once again find ourselves in the Fallout universe. Last time we looked into some eerie mannequins that may or may not be alive. Today, we look into something that is far deeper and is probably true within the franchise. A theory that spans from the newest title to the earlier games, and with countless points of evidence to back. We invite you to follow us into the theory of the interloper and the cult of Dunwich.
The interloper theory is massive and spans over multiple games in the franchise. It is a theory that ties to unknown and all-powerful entities, and maybe even into the events that created the universe. As interesting as that may seem, it is pretty difficult to follow this one without context, so we'll be looking into this in a way that will make the most sense. The biggest clues to start us off can be found within Dunwich Borers in Fallout 4. The area is a nearly abandoned quarry with nothing more than raiders taking any scraps they can find.
This may not seem like a strange place at first. That is until you fight your way to the bottom of the mine shaft and find yourself in a blocked section far below the quarry. As you explore this mine, you will find multiple terminals left behind by the workers who suggest something far darker that was going on here. What we know about this mine is that it was under an in-universe corporation known as Dunwich LLC, and their main focus was of excavation and selling of digging equipment.
These terminals that can be found in the mine reveal that it was not made to find and retrieve resources, but to actually dig up something that the messages only refer to as it. This is not the only area that it is referred to. Very close to Dunwich Borers, you can find a small area called Hugo's Hole, a home made of what looks to be concrete blocks, most likely excavated from the quarry, littered with traps. Past the traps is a small room with a bloody bed, a table, and an audio log called Hugo's Struggle.
This log created by the titular character shows the decision this character was going through as raiders attacked the Borers. He thinks about killing the raiders himself, but chooses not to because it wouldn't want him to do that. He ultimately chooses to take his own life. Now that's strange. We can infer that this Hugo character could be a member of the cult of Dunwich that we mentioned at the beginning of this journey. But who exactly is it that these different areas are referring to? We'll get back to that soon enough.
Returning to the mines, what we get from these terminals is pretty big. We can infer that the real motive behind this whole company's operation is not mining for profit. That is simply a front to look for something more ambitious. The deeper into the mine, the stranger things become. For one, the mine will shake at random, and entries by raiders who see strange things and appears going mad can be found. Throughout it all, we see flashbacks of miners working pre-war. These flashbacks fade and the miners are replaced with the ghoulified remains of their former selves.
Reaching the end of the mine will give you the most important flashback of all. 10 people kneel before an altar, and standing before it is a priest-like figure. Once again, the vision fades, and the people at the altar are replaced with more ghouls. Strangest of all is that 4 of them are named: Bob Stanson, Bradley Ramone, John Hatfield, and Tim Schutz. All are names of 4 out of 6 of the known project managers that worked for Dunwich LLC. Some of their entry logs on the various terminals found throughout the mine could be found as well. Where the altar stood in the flashback, a hole completely filled with water now resides.
Entering the water-filled tunnel, at the very bottom you'll find a metallic face looking up at you. To the side you'll find the same altar from the flashback and a knife that looks to be for rituals called Krev's Tooth. So what exactly was going on? What was it that the Dunwich company was attracted to and was looking for? We can infer that the face has something to do with these sacrifices and strange happenings. Players have found that you can no-clip in the tunnel to get a better look at the metallic face, as shown here.
What they found was a lower half that is impossible to see in normal gameplay. More interesting is that the lower half is a design that can be found on pre-war architecture throughout the game, such as the Mass Fusion Tower in downtown Boston. That's an interesting piece of information, but it may just be a coincidence or the creators of the game just reusing assets. We'll look deeper and see if this theory is true or not.
To look deeper into this Dunwich conspiracy, we find ourselves at the Parson State Insane Asylum, a place we should probably check into for looking so deep into this. Here we find a strange character who ties into the mystery, Lorenzo Cabot. What makes him such an interesting sight to Fallout players is the fact that he is over 400 years old, born far before the war. At face value, it may seem like this character has nothing to do with the conspiracy as a whole.
During some quests, we learn more about Lorenzo's past. He was once an archaeologist, and at some point in his life was exploring the Rub al-Khali desert. Here he discovered an ancient city below the sand. It's revealed that this city he found was far more mysterious, for it predated the existence of humanity as we know. He speculates that the creators of this city were in fact ancient aliens, and in this city he found a crown of sorts. We didn't specifically point it out, but I'm sure you noticed. It can be assumed that the crown mentioned is the same Lorenzo is wearing when we see him.
The crown spoke to him and told him to hide the lost city and never reveal it again. Supposedly, the crown also gave him the ability of telepathy and intelligence beyond human understanding. This was all well and good, but the catch was that the crown could not be taken off, and it also stopped him from aging and gave him murderous intent, which is the reason for his family to leave him in an asylum.
Lorenzo's son, Jack, began to experiment on his father in an attempt to cure him. What he found, though, was that he could use his father's blood as an age-stopping serum. This fact is true because we can find Jack and many members of his family alive in the present day of Fallout 4, still residing in their preserved pre-war home. You may have caught on as we explain this character, but we'll explain more just in case.
The story of Lorenzo is a clear reference and inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's Nameless City, which has almost exactly the same plot down to the Lost City also being under the Rub al-Khali desert. We didn't mention this earlier, but the strange unseen horror that was described within Dunwich Boars is a clear inspiration from Lovecraft's work, and the name Dunwich is directly from the Dunwich Horror, also by H.P. Lovecraft. What connects Lorenzo to this Dunwich cult is strangely enough an obscure trading card that can be found in the Chinese exclusive Fallout shelters.
A trading card depicting Lorenzo in front of the same face can be found. This may be a stretch to use as evidence, but let's look deeper. From these two stories we can guess that the driving force of these two separate groups is actually one and the same. We can theorize by what we've seen so far that the face is connected to the pre-war faces is somehow inspired by the mysterious entity of ancient ruins and beings. We assume that that's what the Dunwich Company is after, an ancient city. Maybe the large head was a relic of that long-forgotten past. Clearly something happened to stop them from going any farther.
That's about all that can be found within Fallout 4. Like we mentioned before, this theory spans over multiple games. The first ever clues to this mystery came from the predecessor, Fallout 3. Within the game resided an area known as the Dunwich Building, which of course is in association to the prominent company we talked about before. The Dunwich Building is an office owned by the company that is now abandoned and left for ghouls to roam. Here we can also be met with flashbacks and holotapes.
These holotapes are made by someone named Jamie, who ventured into the building prior to the events of the game. The man is in search of his father and a book that both went missing. As we find ourselves deeper in the cave, we find that Jamie is becoming more unhinged as he explores deeper. Jamie can finally be heard chanting to a being he refers to as Ugg Qualtoth. Reaching the lowest level of the building, you'll find a large foggy cave system.
Within this cave, we find an obelisk surrounded by multiple ghouls, including Jamie from the tapes. After killing your enemies, you can look closely at the obelisk. It looks almost like the Washington Monument, with tentacles rising from below it and a woman coming out of it from the side. From what we already got from Fallout 4, we can assume that the Dunwich Company had this office building intentionally placed above this strange structure.
This unfortunately is all that we can get from Fallout 3. It is an interesting starting point for players though. Just enough to keep it vague and interesting. We finally reached the final game to give us more information about what's going on behind the scenes. We find ourselves in not-so-fan favorite Fallout 76. 76 is by far the game with the most evidence to link the Dunwich conspiracy.
In 76, we can visit an area known as Lucky Hole Mine, which is different compared to the other areas we've explored, for the Lucky Hole Mine was not owned by the Dunwich Company. Terminals can be found within the mine depicting the days leading prior to the bombs dropping at the beginning of the game. In those fateful days, the workers were closing the mine, but noticed strange people stalking the areas from afar. The strange people are of course implied to have been trying to enter the mine. After the abandoning of the mine, these people would be able to easily enter it.
Exploring the mine, you'll find strange totems made of root-like appendages, human bones, and antlers. The roots being similar to the ones found in the obelisk in Fallout 3. As well as this, we can find large metallic faces similar to the ones found in Fallout 4. And of course, as usual, there are holotapes spread around the mine. this time recorded by a man known as Jeff Lane, who explains that he is exploring this area in search for a being known as the Interloper. Unlike the others, and as of the present moment in game, this area is filled with living cultists rather than ghouls. Although this location used to be inhabited by mole miners, but we won't go off on that tangent. Fighting through them will bring you to a disturbing sight.
A large, disgusting creature with human-like legs, no discernible face, and a mass of long tentacles that move and bleed. This creature in a way is similar to the obelisk seen in Fallout 3, a humanoid meshed with roots and veins. Both seem to call out to people, and we can guess that they all call out for people to dig down, most likely to find artifacts and evidence of lost time.
As of now, this is where the journey ends and speculation begins. This huge story is clearly based off the works of H.P. Lovecraft. Like mentioned earlier, the name Dunwich itself is directly taken from the title of one of his books. We can assume that these strange artifacts are all related and were being searched for by this company that all these strange occurrences surround.
We didn't mention, but in some Fallout 3 DLC, the owner of Dunwich LCC, Richard Dunwich, was described to be obsessed with the occult. We can assume that he was directly the reason for the search of these strange artifacts. Similarly to Lorenzo, who found the crown through excavation, Richard may have also been in search for ancient artifacts. As with characters like Jamie or Jeff, he too was being led to different sites by unknown forces. We can assume that the large faces found in these occult areas and in old world architecture, that maybe they are inspired by ancient civilization. That would mean that Dunwich is only the tip of an iceberg revolving around eldritch beasts and ancient aliens that we only scratch the surface of.
For now, the journey ends. We can only wait for future DLC or releases to learn more about this mystery. There are even more mysteries we didn't cover here that could have some relation to Dunwich, such as the cult of Mothman, which seems to be as crazy of a cult as it gets. If you're interested in learning more about this, please let us know. This backstory adds so much to the franchise already packed with lore and secrets. That's why we, and many others, like these games so much, and how people like Matt can put countless amounts of hours into the game.
Can't help it when there's eldritch horrors and evil mannequins to hunt for. Stay curious.
Join us again next time, when we once again go obscure.